LeaderCast.
This week on the Deep Leadership Podcast.
What has inspired me and where I am today and what has made me the man that I am today are the really dreadful managers and leaders that I work for. And they're the ones that I can remember.
Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. Well, I hope all is well with you today. It's another beautiful day here in North Carolina, and I'm enjoying a hot cup of coffee from our friends at the Salty Sailor Coffee Company. Salty Sailor is a veteran-known coffee brand and is the official coffee of the Deep Leadership Podcast. Listeners get 10% off their amazing selection of fresh roasted coffee by going to saltysailorcoffee.com and entering the code DEEP at checkout. Today's episode is also brought to you by our other sponsors, Leader Connect, Ignite Management Services, and Liberty Strength. All these sponsors help me bring these shows to you each and every week, so I highly encourage you to click on their links below and check them out. In this episode of the Deep Leadership Podcast, I'm joined by Robin Hills, a business psychologist and emotional intelligence trainer. We sat down and discussed the critical role of emotional intelligence and resilience in effective leadership. Emotional intelligence is one of those must-have skills for every leader, and this was a powerful conversation that you don't want to miss. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started.
Welcome to Deep Leadership. Leadership is a people business. That's the philosophy of your podcast host, John Rennie. As a former Cold War submarine officer who spent 20 plus years leading businesses in corporate America before starting his own manufacturing business, he knows that leadership matters. Are you ready for some real-world actionable advice from John as well as his expert guests?
I'm ready.
The show starts right now.
Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Robin Hills. Robin is a business psychologist and emotional intelligence trainer. He is the director of EI for Change, a company specializing in educational training, coaching, and personal development, focused on emotional intelligence, positive psychology, and neuroscience. He has taught more than 500,000 people in 200 countries how to build resilience, self-awareness, and build an understanding of others. His educational programs on resilience and emotional intelligence cover the most comprehensive and detailed education of any emotional intelligence organization. And I'm excited to have him on the show to talk about resilience and emotional intelligence for leaders. So, Robin, welcome to the show.
John, it is a pleasure to be on here. Thank you ever so much for inviting me to be on your show.
Absolutely. And I'm so impressed with how many people you have taught emotional intelligence to. And to be honest with you, we need more of it. So I'm really glad to hear that. And before we press record, I was excited. You taught in more than 200 countries. I didn't even know there were 200 countries that you could actually teach in. So congratulations.
Thank you. I'd be hard pushed to name half of them.
That's fantastic. Well, very impressive. But let's, just get down to the basics. Explain what emotional intelligence is.
Very, very simply, emotional intelligence is being smart with your feelings. It's the way you combine your thinking with the way in which you're feeling in order to make good, authentic decisions and build up quality relationships with the intention of taking action. It's nothing more complicated than that, but very easy to say, very, very difficult to do.
It seems that way. So, and how does it play into leadership? We have a rapidly evolving changing business environment. The world has shifted and changed. We've seen some major global events over the past 5 to 10 years that are unprecedented. Why is emotional intelligence so important for leadership now more than ever?
Well, I think we're in a kind of emotional recession at the moment because if we look at some of the decisions that are being made by our political lords and masters, I'm rather embarrassed by them. And I'm not singling out any particular country here. I'm just looking generally. And I think leaders ought to be listening to their people and trying to understand things from their perspective rather than from their own perspective. So to go back to your question, why is emotional intelligence important for leadership? It's because as leaders, we are not getting the results that we need through ourselves. We're getting them through the people that choose to follow us. So what we need to do is to ensure that we engage with them in a cognitive manner, rationally and logically, and at an emotional level, because what we want to do is to ensure that these people are emotionally engaged in what it is that we're trying to do, and they feel they want to come along with us for the ride.
Well, it's interesting you say that because we do have an engagement problem that has been consistently bad in corporations for decades now. 30% of employees roughly are engaged, the rest are not. And you just said something that's interesting is that you say leaders need to engage with the people. If we want to have an engaged workforce, we have to engage with them. So is that part of one of the challenges we have with employee engagement these days is that leaders are really not doing a good job engaging with employees?
I've got to say there are some brilliant leaders out there within the corporate environment that are affecting change, and they are starting to do the right thing. I think a lot of organizations are still very, very much wrapped up in the management of the 80s and 90s, which came from the management of the 30s and the 40s. And I know you and many of your listeners come from a militaristic background. And I think that there have been some great leaders that have been military leaders. And I think a lot of people still associate leadership in the same way. And military leadership has changed dramatically from what it is. And I think people have still got preconceived ideas that it's being in the army barracks with the sergeant major shouting at everybody in order to get things done. Now, yeah, that is appropriate under certain circumstances, but it's not appropriate all the time within the corporate environment. So I think what we've got to do is to take our lead from what the military and the services are trying to do in terms of their leadership and lead people properly. And I think through that, we'll get better engagement.
I agree. It's interesting you say that because part of when I came out of the military, a lot of people were afraid of me coming in as their boss because they assumed I would be command and control. And I had to remind them, I spent, 5 years of my life it's locked in a metal tube in a submarine under the ocean. And there you had to use influence to be able to get things done. It wasn't like, my rank on my shoulder. It was how I dealt with people. And in a very dangerous environment, in a very long days under the ocean, it's like we had deep relationships with our employees. I knew where my employees, how they were motivated and struggles that they had because I spent hours and hours with them directly. So yeah, it was just the opposite of command and control. It was very much a deep relationship that I had with my employees. Well, my sailors, I should say.
And I think what we've got to do is to get rid of our preconceived ideas, because I must say that was my view of militaristic leadership about 20, 30 years ago, because I knew no different. That's what I'd seen on the telly. That's what I'd seen in the films. Therefore, that's what happens. But reality is something completely different. And I've had to break my prejudices down around militaristic leadership, along with many of my other prejudices, to work within the field of emotional intelligence. So I think the thing is all the time, whether we are having a conversation with somebody who we know incredibly well, or somebody who's got some experience that we think we know about, what we've got to do is to carry on asking questions. Help me to understand, have I got this right? Is this a correct assumption? Are my preconceived ideas that I've got off the telly correct?
Is that a part of emotional intelligence? Is curiosity? Because I think I do think there's something there because I tend to be a curious person, and I really like to understand people and where they come from and their backgrounds and why they think the way they think. Is that a part of emotional intelligence, being curious?
Yes, it is, but it's not labeled as such in the traditional frameworks of emotional intelligence. The label that's being used is empathy. Now, in order to become empathetic with other people, you've got to be curious. How can I see things from your perspective? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Can I feel and think the same way? And that's where the curiosity element does come in. So good, deep leaders have that curiosity.
Interesting. Yeah. So curiosity and empathy are related then. So you're interested in others. So you're willing to, ask the questions and listen to the answers.
Yes, I would say absolutely, because empathy is not agreeing with somebody. It's trying to see things from their perspective. You don't have to agree with the other person to be empathetic. You just need to understand. And that it really is the hard bit. It's getting that understanding, because you might not like what you hear. That's an interesting perspective. I've not thought of it that way. When was the first time you started to think along those lines? What prompted you to think that way? What is it that somebody said or did that really resonated with you, so that you are then leading and following that pathway? This is something that I've missed along the way. Help me to see it from your perspective. Now, that's incredibly hard, particularly if somebody is talking about something which transgresses one of our core values, because the emotion that we are likely to feel at that time is an unpleasant one, and that's usually anger.
When you say that, all I can think of is sort of the tribalism I see. I try to avoid politics because I can't stand it, but I see a lot of tribalism that exists in just the daily battles on Twitter, the news that you hear. And it's almost like we lack the emotional intelligence when it deals with people who are not in our tribe or have some sort of belief system that we disagree with. And so we quickly say, that's the enemy, and I'm going to fight the enemy. And but the truth of the matter is, as you said, with curiosity, we find out, why do you think the way you think? Why is that such a strongly held belief that you have? And I think, like you said, empathy is not about agreeing, but it's about understanding the other person.
Sure. Look, let's take politics out of it. It's too easy to become emotional around politics. Sports. People will support particular teams, or we're coming up to the Olympics this year, so we'll be very jingoistic and nationalistic around our own national teams, and that will give us some tribalism. I've noticed it on Facebook. If people drive a particular car, there's a tribalism there.
True.
If people listen to a certain genre of music, there's a certain tribalism there. So I think tribalism happens within groups of people when they get together. They really kind of exacerbate the similarity, and they're looking for that difference. And it then becomes us and them. And I think honestly, this is tens of thousands of years of social conditioning that is built up into us. And it's very, very, very difficult to wash that out of our society. So I think what we've got to do at an individual level is to say, okay, I don't necessarily need to be part of a tribe, or if I am part of a tribe, let me embrace other ways of thinking and other ways of being. I'm going to give you an example. I listen to electronic music. It's my great passion, particularly something is symphonic and choral. And you can't tell it's electronic because of the subtleties and the nuances within the way in which the music is played and composed. I do not like rap music. It's a part of tribalism that I don't buy into, but it doesn't stop me from listening to it from time to time, and I can appreciate the energy and the joy that people can get from it. I still don't like it, but I do need to test myself from time to time to say, look, am I missing something here? Yeah. Probably 40 years in terms of an age difference, but No, it's a case of keeping an open mind. I was in India last month. I'm not a particular fan of Indian music, but I happened to be at a Bollywood awards ceremony, Fashion and Glamour Awards. I didn't get an award, but some of the people that did get an award are some of the Indian pop stars, and they were invited to sing on the stage. And it was absolutely wonderful to listen to them singing pitch perfect and without accompaniment. It's not music that I would choose to tune into, but I had the joy of being able to experience it live, which was phenomenal.
I love that, and I think you're right. I think if we can, stay curious to explore things that maybe we disagree with from time to time, or we think we hate, or we think we don't like, and just because I think we change over time, right? We as humans, we evolve and we change, and our thinkings change, and like I think of food that we may not like, then we try it again. We're like, well, this is wonderful. Where has this been all my life? And I think so. I think we need to keep an open mind, like you said, and be open to being exposed to things that we think we don't like or we don't want to be around. Yeah, I love that. That's fantastic.
But also, John,
go ahead.
But to build upon that, also, John, it's having an open mind around how we did think in the past, because what I do, and I'm sure you do it and your listeners do it as well, assume that the 20-year-old Robin Hills thinks in the same way that I do today. Now, I've changed. I've got different friends. I do different things. So my thinking must be different today from what it was as a 20-year-old. The only connection there is me, and I've changed and adapted to the environment around me. So I think if we have this assumption that, the 20-year-old is exactly the same as I am today, a wrong assumption.
Yeah, entirely. Yeah, we are changing and evolving and hopefully getting better if we're doing everything right. But that's right. I think expose yourself to things, I remember like talking, growing up, people would say, "Oh, have you ever tried sushi?" And the idea of raw fish would be like, no, I don't eat sushi. So I would say I don't eat bait, right? But the first time I had it, I was like, where has this been all my life? Like I never expected it to be so good. So it's fantastic.
My camera's gone off, I'm afraid. So
that's all right. We'll keep running with the audio.
Just going to switch to my logo. So there we are.
Okay, that's fine. We'll keep with the audio. So the one of the things I was interested in is how. So I understand emotional intelligence, but what about emotional resilience? How are they connected or related?
Well, it goes back to everything that you've been talking about, everything that we've been talking about in terms of adapting to the environment that we find ourselves in. Now, we haven't got a lot of control over the environment. What we can control is our behavior. And our behavior is determined by our emotional reaction to the environment. So the best way to build your emotional resilience is to look at making the most appropriate choices. Now, we may find ourselves in situations, we've got an expression in the United Kingdom, Hobson's choice. I don't know whether you're familiar with it across the world, but what it means is that you have, say, half a dozen choices. None of the choices are great choices at all. What you've got to do is to make a choice, and you've got to choose the best of a bad bunch. Now, you might not like that situation, but the reality is you can't change it. You have to make a decision. And so you have to use your emotions in the most appropriate way to drive your thinking and your rationality in order to make the best choice of a bad bunch.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that's it. And I would imagine that it's a big part of leadership is that you often have that a list of sometimes not great options. And so part of our job, though, is as leaders, is to make those decisions and kind of keep the organization moving forward with the best options available at the time. So how does that how is emotional resilience, how is that important in leadership? I mean, I think you want to find leaders that can be stable and can keep persevering through difficult times. I would imagine that's critical.
Sure. I think the important thing here is for leaders to be vulnerable, to talk to their teams and say, look, this is the situation that I'm facing. This is the decision that I am making based upon what you've told me, the feedback that I've received and the insights that you've given me. It's not the best choice. If we have made the wrong decision, we have to put our hands up and say, look, we've not made the right decision here. Let's change it. But part of good leadership is keeping everybody informed. And you asked me for a definition of emotional intelligence. Let me give you a definition of resilience, which I think will help your leaders, because a lot of people will look at resilience as being the ability to bounce back. It's not. It's everything that we've been talking about. It's learning, it's growing, it's adapting to situations as they unfold. So resilience really is threefold. It's first of all, accepting a harsh reality, but having realistic optimism within that situation. You might not like the situation, but the reality of the situation is it is uncomfortable. It's changing. It's complex. It's volatile. It's changing on a day-to-day basis. So what are your core values? What are you trying to do? What are your goals within leadership? Because keep focused on those. They are vitally important in terms of being resilient. Don't change your goals just simply because everything changed. Keep focused on what it is that's giving you meaning as leadership. And then have the creativity and adaptability to put things to new, unconventional uses to make the most of the situation that you find yourself in. Combining all three will make you resilient. Combining all three and becoming resilient will make you more emotionally resilient because, it might feel unpleasant, but you're learning and growing through that.
That makes a lot of sense. I once heard somebody talking about being an entrepreneur, and I've been running my manufacturing business for eight years, and I heard this definition. I really made sense to me is that an entrepreneur has a foot in two canoes, and the one canoe is the reality of the current situation, right? Just making sure that you don't stick your head in the sand, that you're actually aware of your unique, your situation at this time, which might be difficult. But the other canoe is this optimism of that you have a plan for the future, and you're continuing to push towards that future that you want for your company. So you have to sort of have a foot in both sides. Otherwise, if you get too sucked into the current situation, you could fail. But also, if you're too optimistic and you're not aware of your current surroundings, you could be ignoring problems. So you almost have to balance those two sides of things every day as an entrepreneur.
It is, and it goes back to the two words that I used: realistic optimism. So we don't want blind rose-tinted spectacles optimism, and we don't want a realism with too much pessimism thrown in. We want that to get that balance that you're talking about, John. Absolutely right.
Yeah. And I think I go back to Angela Duckworth a lot in her book Grit, and she talked about grit is the passion and perseverance for long-term goals. Like you're so motivated by your long-term objective and your goal that you're willing to go through anything to get there. And I think of a lot of the military, kind of environment, especially to try to become a nuclear certified naval officer. It's a very difficult and long and arduous process, but you do it because you look you get through the tough times because you're trying to get to your end goal because you have a passion for that. And I think the same thing is with our goals. If we have a passion for our goals, we're willing to endure to get to that, that end zone, that final end state.
Yeah, that most certainly. What I would also like to bring in here in terms of this discussion around deep leadership and emotional intelligence and emotional resilience is that there seems to be a preconceived idea around leadership, particularly male leaders, that they've got to make the right decision and they're very much on their own. No, leadership is about sharing and caring. So it's opening up that, I've used the word vulnerability, and saying, look, I'm having a hard time here. I need some help. I need some support. I need your thoughts, your guidance. I need your experience. I need you to tell me that I'm doing the right thing. And I think a lot of men find it very, very, very difficult to do that. And that may be through their upbringing, that may be through the role of their father or their grandfather, and may be due to the experience that they've had at school and, dare I say, in the services and in military environments with the preconceived ideas that I've spoken about. So people have got this idea that, I've got to come up with the right decisions here. I've got to do it on my own. I've got to prove that I'm strong. I've got to prove that I have this grit. And I think that the big issues that we've got around male mental health and the high numbers of suicide is down to the fact that men just have not got this ability to share their emotions and say, I'm suffering. I just need some help. And that is a sign of good leadership. You're a good leadership because of it. You're a good leader because of it, not despite it.
Interesting. Yeah, I think you're right. That is definitely one. And we talk a lot about that here on this show, the idea of leading yourself first and having a support network in place, especially, as a leader, you want to have, you're going to have challenge. I mean, these are tough roles. And so you need to be able to have a mentor, a support network, a confidant that you can talk to, because you are going to run into those situations where you feel overwhelmed, and I think that, it's natural in these roles.
I'm a great advocate here, John, of having a cathartic moan. What I mean by that is meeting up with somebody who you trust and who you trust will listen to you. It might be within the organization, it might be outside of the organization, but what they've got the capacity to do is just to hear you out, ask the right questions, not impose their idea that you're in this situation because of something that you've done. Help you to determine your way out of that situation just by listening and just by asking the right questions. So perhaps they do a bit of coaching, perhaps they do a bit of mentoring, but they just know how to allow you to sound off. And the great thing is it feels good to have dumped some of your woes on somebody else. They're not taking it on board. All they're doing is listening. And at the end of it, you feel very, very refreshed because you've shared your problem. And also, through sharing your problem and through some of the questions they've asked or some of the things that you've said, you've got some clarity. You've got a pathway that you can move forward with. So I would encourage people to have a really good cathartic moan when they need to.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do these jobs without that. So you need to, we've talked about this, listeners, you've heard me say this before. Make sure you have, someone in your life that you can talk to, because these sometimes can be lonely jobs. And so you need to have that person that you can confide in. I like it to be outside the business, just because it's someone that can think, this can see the bigger picture. But it's really, really important to have, because these jobs are not easy. And so you're going to have those tough times. And you need to be able to have that discussion, that open dialogue, and be able to share your emotions with someone. for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And being able to just really take a deep breath, stand back from the business, and listen to some of these really stupid questions that people are asking you outside of the business because they don't understand. And because they don't understand, those stupid, simplistic questions may hold the answer.
Almost always hold the answer. That I love that you say that, because it seems like a stupid question, but it makes you think differently. And
It does.
Yeah, I love that. So you've taught over 500,000 people in the idea of emotional intelligence and emotional resilience. So I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it because I saw a lot of bad managers in my time. I spent 22 years in corporate. I saw people with very little emotional intelligence trying to call themselves leaders. Can emotional intelligence and emotional resilience be learned? Can we teach it, and can people learn how to become a more emotionally intelligent?
Well, if they can't learn it, I wouldn't be in a job. No, let me go back to the science. Our IQ, our cognitive intelligence, is fixed around the age of 17 or 18. We can't get smarter. That is fixed. What isn't fixed is our emotional intelligence, and what isn't fixed is our resilience, and we can learn and grow. And we have an infinite number of opportunities open to us in terms of learning how to become more emotionally intelligent and more emotionally resilient. Now, it's thought that our emotional resilience and our emotional intelligence then gets locked about the age of 70. And it may be because the cognitive decline starts creeping in at that age. So all of us have loads and loads and loads of opportunities to learn to become much more emotionally intelligent. But it is very, very hard. All I can do is point people in the right direction and say, these are some things that you need to go away and think about. Go away and make mistakes. Go and try it. Go and upset people because you're trying something different. And a lot of people don't like doing that because that makes them a more vulnerable leader. But if you go along and say, look, I'm just working on my emotional intelligence. I'm trying to be a little bit more assertive. I want you to give me some feedback to let me know if it's working, how it makes you feel, or if I overstep the mark and become too aggressive. Now, that's just one silly little example, but that's one way in which you can work to improve your emotional intelligence.
That makes a lot of sense. That's a good place to start. Yeah, thank you. That's excellent, and it's good. It's good. So you can learn this. You can develop it. I like the idea that, as you say, your IQ is sort of fixed, but your EQ can change, and so I like to hear that. So. There's hope out there for those managers who don't seem like they have an emotional intelligence, so they can learn it and they can get better and they can become more empathetic and can get control of their emotions. So that's good. That's good to hear. Well, what final message, Robin, would you like to leave with our listeners today?
Well, I think one of the important messages is building upon what you have just said. Some of the less than emotionally intelligent leaders find it very difficult to actually admit that they're not as emotionally intelligent as they would like to be. So what I found in terms of training and supporting people at very senior leadership positions within the organization is that I have to provide them with a workshop over a period of time, or a program over a period of time, called Advanced Emotional Intelligence Skills. Now, the content of this program is actually very basic emotional intelligence skills. The Advanced Emotional Intelligence Skills is a program or a workshop for the junior leaders within the organization because they get emotional intelligence. but the organization is geared up in such a way that the senior managers wouldn't go on a basic emotional intelligence course. So it has to be badged advanced emotional intelligence skills. And they wouldn't allow their junior managers and leaders to go on an advanced emotional intelligence course because they need a basic emotional intelligence course. So in actual fact, the titles are wrong, but the content is flipped. And I've seen that happen so many times in terms of delivering emotional intelligence over the years. And people just, I think you and your listeners will understand that and get some wry humor from it. But that's the reality of the situation that we face when we're helping people to become more emotionally intelligent.
I absolutely love that. You've sort of answered one question I've struggled with for many years, is that the people who need leadership training the most are the people that are the terrible leaders, the terrible managers. And the ones that need it the least are typically the ones consuming leadership content, reading the books, they're listening to this podcast, they're trying every day to become better leaders. So you've said, I don't want to say you tricked, but you've recognized that the people without the emotional intelligence, you will see the advanced and say, "Oh, that's for me. I should be in the advanced program." And so maybe we should put all our content as advanced leadership concepts, and maybe the people who need it the most will find it.
I think that's a very, very good way to lead leadership training. One other further thought that I would like to share with you and your listeners is I'm often asked the question, can you think of a really great leader that you've worked with who has inspired you? The answer is no, I can't. In actual fact, what has inspired me and where I am today and what has made me the man that I am today are the really dreadful managers and leaders that I work for. And they're the ones that I can remember.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, it is so true. Everywhere I go, I hear stories of bad managers and bad bosses. And because we remember those, right? We remember those stories, and we remember how they make us feel. And isn't that interesting? And again, that can be inspiration to become a great leader, is just having a bad boss.
It can be. And one final word, and I think it's helping you and your listeners to understand the question: am I, Robin Hills, emotionally intelligent? What an interesting question. Because if I answer no, what on earth am I doing in the field of emotional intelligence? But if I answer, oh, yes, I am, it suggests that there's no room for improvement.
Yes.
So it's work in progress. It depends. There are certain situations where I'll go in and we'll have a great conversation and I'll build up some great relationships and make some really good decisions. And I'll come out and think, yeah, I've got this emotional intelligence summed up. And then there are other times when I'll go into a situation and I'll completely screw up. The reason being is I'm human like you are.
Yes. I love that you say that. I think it's really important. It's one of the reasons why when I get introduced as a leadership expert, I don't like that term, because I do believe it's a lifelong journey, and there is, you're always learning something new, and to be an expert at something, it just doesn't seem right in a field that's so deep and there's so much to learn. So yeah, I love that. We're always learning. We're always trying to get better, and we're also human. We're going to make mistakes.
And just live them and breathe them and learn from them.
Yep, absolutely. Well, this has been fantastic, Robin. How can our listeners find out more about you, your company, and all the books you've written?
Well, I've got a website, EI4Change. That's EI4change.com. People can go there. There are some free resources that people can get access through the website. One of them is a free book, Develop Your Emotional Intelligence. I've also got a free course, Working with Mindfulness. Go through the homepage of the website and click on the right links, and you'll get access to these materials. If you want to see the courses, the range of courses that I've got, go to https:// you need to put that bit in, courses.eiforchange.info/collections, and you'll see all the courses that I've got available on and around and based on emotional intelligence.
Fantastic. And we're going to make it easy for you listeners. We're going to put a link in the show notes so that you don't have to type that all in. And so you'll click on that. You're going to get to these courses. And again, there's some free resources there. How do you develop your emotional intelligence? We're going to put a link to that as well. Again, this is an important subject for leaders, and emotional intelligence, emotional resilience is really essential for good leadership. So I highly encourage you to check out these links down below here in the show notes, and check out Robin's website and look through a lot of the resources you can find. Again, many of those resources are free, and then there's a whole list of courses you can take if you're looking to develop and better develop your resilience and or emotional intelligence. You can find one of those courses there. But again, I highly encourage you to explore this topic if it's something that's really resonating with you, because it's really essential to good leadership. Robin, I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing all of your experience and knowledge on this important topic.
Oh, I wish I could share even more, but you say all, there's lots more to explore. But thank you, John. It has been a wonderful experience. Really enjoyed it.
I did as well, so thank you. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.
Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all you do.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and updates, please visit our website at www.deepleadershippodcast.com or johnsrennie.com. Until next time, take care.
For those of you who dream of a world where music and podcasts live together in perfect harmony, now, for the first time, Electricast gives you a magical compilation, Pod Till You Drop, Volume 1, where we give you the best in tunes and the best in podcasts. Feast your ears and hear the culture. Available now wherever you listen to music.
Today is working for me. Do you believe that for yourself? Hey, I'm Pastor Julie, and I want to empower you through encouragement. Inviting you to my podcast, Big Truth Encouragement, where I unpack living a faith-filled life. I created my podcast for the ladies, but gentlemen, you'll gain something too. So I invite you to listen to Big Truth Encouragement on Electricast and any platform where you listen to your podcast.
Electricast.